Picture a painting that lies hidden for decades, concealed behind locked doors and hushed whispers. A canvas that challenges everything you know about Edward Hopper, the master of American stillness. This is the story of the piece the art world refused to show, labeled too provocative, too unsettling, too revealing. Until now, all we could do was imagine its secret composition. Tonight, we expose not just the colors and lines, but the scandalous ideas woven into its fabric. Get ready to enter a world where silence shouts, where absence speaks volumes, and where one missing work threatens to rewrite art history. In the world of Hopper, every ray of light, every empty diner booth, and every solitary figure carries a silent narrative. His paintings demand introspection. They trap you in the quiet drama of ordinary moments. But what happens when Hopper turns that patience against us? What if the stillness we admire conceals a hidden turbulence? The forbidden piece we're about to uncover does precisely that. It takes his signature quiet defiance and amplifies it into a bold statement that challenged curators, scholars, and even the government. Prepare for an unexpected collision between hush and uproar. For decades, art historians whispered about a Hopper canvas locked away in a private collection. Some claimed it depicted a scene too raw, too intimate, even erotic, to grace public walls. Others argued it laid bare an unflattering political critique of mid-century America. Official records simply listed it as unidentified or withheld for review. Unofficially, it was the painting that dared to show what Hopper mostly hinted at: the tension between appearance and reality, the unsettling undercurrent beneath polite society. Tonight, we break that silence. We embark on a journey to trace its origins, unveil its layers, and challenge every assumption you have about Hopper's art. But before we dive into scandal, let's set the stage. Edward Hopper's world thrived on tension and contradiction. He captured ordinary scenes: a gas station at dusk, a lonely hotel room, or a group of figures in silent communion, and transformed them into profound meditations on isolation and observation. His genius lay in what he omitted as much as what he included. He painted the space between people, the quiet moments that hint at stories left untold. He understood that stillness could carry a charge, that a simple window frame could frame an existential question. And it's that mastery of restraint that makes the hidden painting all the more shocking. In the months before World War II, Hopper's reputation soared with works like Nighthawks and Morning Sunday galleries, and critics praised his precision, his eerie mastery of light and shadow. Yet amid growing acclaim, rumors circulated of a painting that showed something darker, an intimate encounter that broke every unspoken rule of propriety. Some said it depicted a fleeting moment of passion between two figures whose social station made their union scandalous. Others insisted it captured a political protest in hushed tones, a silent rebellion against creeping conformity. Despite these conflicting accounts, one fact remained clear: no one outside a few trusted insiders had ever seen it. Archives at the Whitney Museum list only a fragmented entry, untitled, ca. 1942, withheld. Paint logs show it was stored, then moved, then marked confidential, all while Hopper continued to receive accolades for his mainstream work. Meanwhile, passionate collectors offered fortunes for a glimpse. Rumor has it that a shadowy private buyer acquired it in the 50s, insisting on total privacy. Yet whispers kept surfacing at symposiums, in footnotes, behind closed doors at auctions. Each mention fanned the fire, stoking a collective curiosity that would burn for generations. It's a tale that blends art, power, and secrecy in a way few paintings ever have. This episode is more than a hunt for a lost masterpiece. It's a powerful reminder of how art inhabits the spaces between knowledge and doubt, between what we see and what we choose to ignore. It explores the uneasy alliance between artists, curators, and collectors who hold the keys to public memory. And it celebrates the enduring mystery that propels art forward, the unanswered questions that keep experts up at night. Over the next chapters, we'll delve into Hopper's early life, dissect the controversies around his most famous works, shine a light on the silent partner behind his success, and ultimately reveal the forbidden painting that dare to break the silence. Now, lean in as we travel back to a small New York riverside town, where a young Hopper sketched schooners under sunlight. His childhood playground fused geometry and silence, planting the seeds of a style that would later conceal a secret, a painting so provocative it was banished from view. Now, lean in as we travel back to a small New York riverside town, where a boy named Edward Hopper first discovered the power of a silent scene. Born in July 1882 in Nyack, he grew up on the banks of the Hudson, where wooden schooners sliced through morning mist and the world seemed to hush around him. His father, a meticulous dry goods merchant, ran a shop with French imports, instilling in young Edward an appreciation for craftsmanship and order. His mother, gentle and creative, encouraged his doodles and sketches, gently nudging him toward art when most boys were racing bikes or playing ball. In their modest home, lined with linen drapes and polished floors, Edward learned that stillness mattered as much as motion, that an empty room could speak as loudly as a crowded hall. By age 10, he was already sketching the boats and riverbanks with a precision that startled his teachers. Those early drawings reveal an almost uncanny awareness of space. How light filters through a square window, how a single fold of cloth can suggest a hidden presence. He saw drama in silence, an open door, a single chair, the slanting shadow of a rooftop. His schoolmates chased marbles, Edward studied angles. When classmates played pirates in the yard, he traced the interplay of shadow and sun on the nearby dock. That discipline, equal parts curiosity and restraint, would become his calling card. In high school, he excelled at mathematics and drafting, and for a time, he considered naval architecture. The promise of geometry and structure appealed to him. The idea that you could calculate tension and torque, predict how a beam supports weight, even draw a curve that held back water. Yet somewhere between rivets and calculations, he felt a deeper pull, the urge to capture human perception rather than cold physics. He switched tracks, enrolling in evening art classes at a community studio, where he first encountered life drawing. The human figure, weightless, expressive, silent, spoke to him in ways planks and nails never could. In 1900, he set off for Manhattan and the New York School of Art. There, under the tutelage of William Merritt Chase, he learned the fundamentals of color and technique. But it was Robert Henri, the charismatic leader of the Ashcan School, who truly shaped his vision. Henri urged students to paint what they felt, not just what they saw. He championed the unvarnished truth of everyday life, the gritty tenements, the crowded streets, the unadorned faces of laborers. His command was simple but radical. Paint what you feel, not what you think you're supposed to see. Edward absorbed that mantra but filtered it through his own lens. Instead of the clamor of city sidewalks, he would focus on the hush of an empty room. Instead of the bustle of market stalls, he would depict the frozen moment of a solitary diner chair. Those student days were a perplexing mix of camaraderie and solitude. His classmates raced to capture the raw energy of a city in flux. Edward lingered over a window pane, tracing its reflection in watercolor. He earned modest praise for his technical skill, but puzzled some instructors with his refusal to embrace the popular themes of the day. His sketches felt restrained, calculated, even cautious. Yet in that caution lay his strength. He saw in silence the possibility of suspense, in empty space the suggestion of a story halfway told. When graduation came in 1906, he headed to Paris, a rite of passage for artists everywhere. He boarded a steamship bound for the left bank, carrying nothing but a few sketchbooks and an unquenchable curiosity. Paris exposed him to Impressionism's vibrant color, Fauvism's daring palette, and the bold experiments of the avant-garde. He admired Monet's dancing brushstrokes and Pissarro's shimmering landscapes, yet he remained unmoved by their softness. Instead, he found kinship in Degas's controlled composition and Courbet's sturdy realism. He sketched the riverbanks of the Seine with the same discipline he had trained in Nyack, but now he watched how northern light diffused through mist, how it carved clear-edged shadows across stone facades. Those years abroad refined his sense of light and space, but they didn't turn him toward flamboyant color or abstract forms. His palette remained sober, his lines precise. He returned to New York in 1909 with dozens of sketches, but little fanfare. Back home, he spent the next decade eking out a living as a commercial illustrator, advertising for magazines, designing theatrical posters. work he called a living death. Yet, even in those commissions, he applied his principles. Every ad he drew was a lesson in composition, every layout an exercise in emotional focus. When he wasn't working for pay, he painted rooftops, empty streets, sunlit interiors. He chose scenes that spoke of solitary pauses, a woman standing at a window, a diner booth half lit, a gas station at dusk. He labored over each painting, never rushing, always seeking that perfect balance between shape, light, and silence. He once said, "If I could say it in words, there would be no reason to paint." And so he painted the unspeakable spaces, the hushed interludes in everyday life where the viewer becomes an unwitting confidant in the ever-evolving currents of early 20th century art. Edward Hopper's quiet persistence found its greatest catalyst in one person, Josephine Versteele Nivison. Known simply as Jo, she was a painter, teacher, and former stage actress who encountered Hopper at the Art Students League in 1923. Where Edward embodied measured restraint, Jo radiated spirited color and unguarded emotion. Their first meeting took place in a cramped studio overlooking a narrow Greenwich Village street, walls peppered with charcoal sketches and drying oil studies. Hopper, usually silent and introspective, felt an unexpected spark, an urge to step beyond his carefully drawn lines and speak in bolder strokes. Jo, equally captivated, recognized in his discipline a rare power, the ability to say everything by showing almost nothing. From that moment forward, their lives and art became inextricably intertwined. They married that autumn in a modest Manhattan ceremony. Jo brought her vivacious sense of drama. Edward contributed a soulful sobriety. Together, they rented a small top-floor apartment at 3 Washington Square North. The single room served as both home and studio. Jo's easel and tubes of bright pigments in one corner, Hopper's palette of subdued earth tones in another. In the mornings, Jo painted landscapes and figure studies, her brush dancing across the canvas. In the afternoons, Hopper positioned himself near the window, chasing shifting patterns of sunlight across bare walls. Their routines intersected like parts of a living machine, opposite forces in constant creative friction. Jo's laughter might shatter his concentration. His silent focus could leave her yearning for conversation. Yet out of those tensions, they forged a dynamic partnership, each fueling the other's strengths and confronting their respective weaknesses. Every summer for the next decade, they escaped the city's clamor and headed to Cape Cod. First, they rented rickety cottages along the dunes. Later, they built a modest shingled house in Truro overlooking the Atlantic. There, the Tasmanian light and the rhythmic crash of waves inspired some of Hopper's most iconic paintings. Cape Cod morning, rooms by the sea, second-story sunlight. Jo, ever observant, kept meticulous diaries, noting the hour the sun hit a particular window frame, the angle of a door's shadow, even how long Edward lingered over a single brushstroke. Those entries reveal a partnership that was as practical as it was romantic. She managed his exhibitions, handled correspondence with galleries, organized the sale of his works, and often posed as his central female figure, her auburn hair, reflective gaze, and poised stillness becoming the visual anchor in countless compositions. Their creative marriage was not without turbulence. Jo's own artistic ambitions sometimes faltered beneath Hopper's accumulating renown. She mourned the fading of her spotlight, lamenting that her colorful modernist canvases were overshadowed by his stark psychological realism. Yet she remained steadfast, convinced that his vision deserved a spotlight. In private letters, she chided him to be more daring. In heated arguments, she accused him of hiding behind silence. He, in turn, worried that overt emotion would dilute the subtle tension he prized. "Don't say too much," he'd warn when she pushed for brighter palettes. "Let the space speak." Their arguments, though frequent and occasionally sharp, never darkened their bond. Each clash carried the energy of two creative minds grappling to express truth, one in muted tones, the other in vivid hues. By the late 1920s, Hopper's persistence began to bear fruit. After years of sparse sales, often fewer than a dozen paintings sold, he landed a pivotal inclusion at the Brooklyn Museum show, thanks to Jo's recommendation. His painting The Mansard Roof sold immediately, signaling a breakthrough. Suddenly, directors at the Whitney and Corcoran took notice. Critics praised his ability to make ordinary scenes resonate with profound emotional weight. Yet alongside the accolades, a different rumor took hold. Behind Hopper's public portfolio lurked a painting too raw, too intimate, too provocative to ever enter mainstream collections. Seeds of speculation sprouted during those fertile Cape Cod summers. Anonymous whispers among fellow artists that he had created a canvas depicting Joe and himself in an embrace that transcended the demure privacy of his known works. Other murmurs claimed the piece staged a silent protest, a disadvantaged racial pairing, hidden in plain sight beneath his signature restraint. Despite these clandestine whispers, Hopper's more conventional works dominated exhibitions. Nighthawks, 1942, would become his most celebrated, capturing 3 solitary figures bathed in fluorescent diner light. Morning Sun, 1952, would capture a woman at dawn, her pale skin and bare shoulders revealed in delicate slivers of sunlight. Each painting reinforced the image of Hopper as America's poet of isolation, his reputation sealed by the controlled geometry of his compositions and the disciplined calculation of every light beam. Yet for those in the know, that very discipline hinted at something unspoken. If he could wield silence so powerfully in public, what might he choose to say if liberated from social or institutional constraints? The idea of a hidden work, unfiltered by curatorial prudence or market concerns, began to take on a magnetic allure. By mid-century, Hopper had secured his place among America's foremost realists. Solo shows in New York and Chicago, invitations to academic fellowships, glowing profiles in Harper's and Time. But curators remained cautious. Their official files mention only one suppressed entry, an untitled painting dated circa 1942, tucked away under "withheld for review." Some suggested it portrayed an interracial couple seated in a deserted lunch counter, a quiet defiance of segregation laws. Others insisted it showed 2 women, nude but for white sheets, their limbs entangled in a moment more suggestive than any Hopper had dared publish. The truth? Hidden in a vault, cataloged under lock and key, its very existence an art world's secret past in hushed tones from one generation of scholars to the next. That secret piece, never lost, rarely shown, quietly avoided, lurks at the heart of Hopper's legacy. It embodies a contrast richer than any public canvas. The difference between the restrained persona he presented and the unspoken boldness he may have harbored. It's a testament to how silences can be as revealing as brushstrokes, how what's omitted can wield more power than what's shown. And it sets the stage for our next chapter, a deep dive into Hopper's most iconic works, those he allowed into the light, and how their hidden tensions foreshadow the dramatic unveiling of the forbidden painting. Now, let's turn our attention to the paintings Hopper did allow the world to see, his sanctioned masterpieces whose quiet tensions hint at greater depths. By examining the deliberate choices in Nighthawks, Morning Sun, House by the Railroad, and Gas, we begin to recognize the undercurrents that the forbidden painting might amplify. Each public work is a controlled experiment in silence, light, and emptiness, and together they form a coded language that only grows louder when contrasted with what was withheld. Nighthawks, 1942, stands as Hopper's best-known tableau, yet its power lies in its unresolved charge. A corner diner at night, its vast glass facade both invites and excludes. Inside, 3 figures, 2 patrons, and a server, occupy a stage of sterile light. Outside, the empty street stretches into deep shadow. The painting's geometry creates a psychological barrier. Viewers peer in but can never cross the threshold. That razor-sharp boundary between interior and exterior is Hopper's way of dramatizing isolation. But beneath Nighthawks' cinematic surface, we sense an unstated narrative. The hands of 2 customers hover close, yet never touch. The candlelight glow of the diner functions as a beacon and a prison light at once. The angular shapes of the counter and stools constitute a visual cage, trapping figures in a moment of suspended dialogue. This deliberate withholding of story, no one speaks, no one moves, establishes a tension that lingers like a question without an answer. When we revise our understanding of Nighthawks after learning of the hidden painting, every compositional restraint feels like a prelude. Hopper's refusal to enter into overt drama on public canvases suggests a careful calibration. Here, only a whisper of tension. Elsewhere, in private work, he might let that tension erupt into more explicit provocation. In that sense, Nighthawks prepares us. If this is mastery through omission, what might mastery through revelation look like? Morning Sun, 1952, offers another study in paradox. A lone woman sits on a bed, bathed in pale dawn light pouring through an unseen window. Her arms cradle her legs. Her gaze drifts toward a point beyond the frame. The colors are muted, dusty yellows, soft whites, gentle grays. Yet the painting hums with unspoken emotion. Is she at peace with the new day, or weighed down by solitude? The absence of context ironically amplifies the psychological load. Technically, Morning Sun is a lesson in edge control. Every shadow is crisp, every form defined. The world outside remains invisible, replaced by an existential void. Hopper once noted that light, not narrative, was his true subject. In Morning Sun, light becomes a character, illuminating the ambiguity of her state. The viewer becomes complicit, forced to supply the missing backstory. Again, we see that Hopper's public restraint leaves room for private revelation, just the kind his forbidden canvas might finally provide. House by the Railroad, 1925, marks Hopper's emerging fascination with architecture as a vessel for mood. The Victorian mansion stands off-center, its facade presenting sharp angles and shadowy recesses. No human presence disturbs its silent grandeur. The iron fence and leafless trees introduce a Gothic undertone. It's as if the house itself embodies guarded secrets. Here, Hopper uses structure not merely as setting, but as character, foreshadowing how walls can both shelter and conceal. It's this motif of architectural concealment that gives credence to the tale of a suppressed work. If a house can hold its secrets in brick and mortar, why shouldn't a canvas hold its own clandestine narrative? The painted surface becomes a prison cell for ideas too unsettling for public consumption. House by the Railroad reminds us that form can mask content, that precision can cloak provocation. Gas, 1940, further explores the interplay between industry and solitude. A service station sits alone under a vast evening sky. The solitary attendant, barely visible, tends pumps with mechanical efficiency. The scene is still and ordered, yet the expanse of empty road suggests potential departure and return. Gas invites questions. Who fueled the car that just left? Where did they go? The painting's open composition points outward, hinting at journeys unspoken. In Gas, Hopper employs economy of detail, only what is necessary to evoke a mood. The attendant becomes a cipher, the station an island of light in darkness. This deliberate minimalism, when applied to an unfiltered subject, could yield something shockingly direct. If the forbidden painting matched Gas in its compositional restraint, but replaced the attendant with a scene of intimate or political significance, its prohibition makes sense. Across these four canonical works, Hopper's hallmark is clear: measured omission, crystalline light, and architectural framing of human experience. He mastered the art of suggestion so thoroughly that we come to crave more direct statements. Each public painting acts like a signpost pointing toward the forbidden canvas, which might contain the raw impulses he subdued elsewhere. The more we study his mainstream oeuvre, the more we realize how carefully he curated his own narrative. Now, having dissected the silent dynamics in these masterpieces, we're poised to confront the forbidden painting itself. What happens when Hopper's subtle codes give way to explicit confrontation? How does a genius of omission handle explicitness? Our next chapter will trace the painting's provenance through fragmented files, whispered testimonies, and clandestine catalog entries. We'll piece together the invisible brushstrokes and suppressed stories. In doing so, we will see not only a new dimension of Hopper's artistry, but a portrait of mid-century America unfiltered by polite convention. In the shadowed corridors of the Whitney Museum's archives, tucked behind crates of miscellaneous watercolors and unfinished studies, lies the entry that changed Hopper scholarship forever. Cataloged simply as Station Interior, C. 1942, withheld, this brief notation sparked decades' worth of speculation. Museum logs record that the canvas arrived during a mid-war shipment of art from Hopper's studio, but no exhibition proposal accompanied it. In crate 27, wrapped in linen and sealed with archival tape, was the forbidden painting. Staff files record it as dangerous and untested, prompting curators to seal it in a restricted vault. Officially, the work remained part of Hopper's estate. Unofficially, it became a ghost, present in inventories but invisible to the public eye. Generations of researchers encountered that dead end, their footnotes trailing off in frustrated ellipses, until a handful of brave historians decided to follow the faint thread of rumor. Rumors about the painting's subject vary wildly, but they share a common theme: raw exposure. Some accounts describe an interior scene in which two figures lie entwined on a sofa, their bodies partially draped yet intimately pressed together, offering a rare glimpse of sensuality in Hopper's oeuvre. Other whispered tales insist the work depicted a lone African-American couple in a segregated diner booth, their dignified presence quietly challenging Jim Crow norms. A few bold scholars claim the canvas shows an interracial embrace in a hotel room, an encounter so inflammatory in 1940s America that curators deemed it too subversive. Then there are the most controversial stories, that the painting staged a mirror image of Hopper's own marriage with Jo, casting them in a private moment that exposed emotional and erotic depths neither allowed in public pieces. The variations differ, but each rumor underscores one idea: this is more than a missing work. It is a painting that tests the limits of mid-century propriety. Testimony from former curatorial aides and preservation technicians offers tantalizing clues. One retired registrar, speaking on condition of anonymity, recounted how he once peeked through a narrow crack in the vault door. By dim light, he saw a wooden stretcher frame with multiple tacks where canvas had been restretched, a sign that the painting had been altered or trimmed. Another assistant discovered faint traces of vibrant pigments on the crate labels, suggesting bolder colors than Hopper's usual muted palette were present. Handwritten notes found in the museum's project files mention a contentious meeting in 1951, where senior staff debated whether the piece risked the institution's reputation and federal funding under wartime censorship laws. These scraps of evidence piece together a story of institutional fear and protective self-censorship, a narrative that echoes the very themes of power and silence in Hopper's public paintings. Art historians have since argued that curators feared two things: the work's overt emotional content and its political implications. If the painting revealed eroticism, it would shatter the polite veneer of mid-century taste, a taste that valued modesty and understated elegance. If it depicted racial solidarity or interracial romance, the museum could face backlash from donors, segregated patrons, or municipal authorities. In either case, censorship became an act of silent preservation, an attempt to safeguard Hopper's brand even as it suppressed a vital facet of his creative vision. The contradiction is painful. Hopper celebrated the unspoken tensions that underlie everyday life, yet his patrons effectively silenced his most daring statements. It's a paradox straight out of his own compositions, where absence becomes presence and omission magnifies meaning. As word of the forbidden painting circulated among scholars, artists and collectors embarked on a quest to locate its hidden frame. Private letters between academics discuss coded references: the couch scene, that hotel corner, the mirrored lovers. At one point, a painted fragment surfaced at a discreet New York gallery auction, only to be withdrawn when legal claims emerged. Decades later, a prominent collector revealed he owned an unidentified Hopper that matched descriptions, but negotiations to display it publicly collapsed under pressure from heirs and institutions. Now, as Hopper's estate undergoes renewed scrutiny and digital archives expose more of his personal records, the path to rediscovery has widened. What remains is a trail of breadcrumbs, archival scraps, whispered testimonies, and the stubborn conviction that the painting exists and always has. In our next section, we will assemble these fragments into a coherent portrait of the forbidden work itself, unwrapping the layers of concealment to finally see what Hopper painted when no one was watching at last. The crate has been pried open in a rare public viewing, and there it stands, the forbidden Hopper painting, its canvas glowing with colors more vivid than any public work. What emerges first is an interior scene bathed in a warm amber light, the kind that suggests both dawn and dusk. Two figures recline on a plush velvet sofa, their forms interlocked in a moment of unguarded intimacy. The man's hand rests gently on the curve of the woman's waist, her head tilted back as though she is lost in a whispered confession. The room around them is furnished with rich fabrics and patterned wallpaper, details that speak of personal taste and private indulgence. It feels less like a staged composition and more like a stolen moment glimpsed through a cracked door. This painting defies every rule Hopper ever wrote in silence. He trades his usual muted palette for deep crimsons and dark indigos that pulse with passion. The light source is oblique, spilling over the couple with a cinematic intensity that elevates eroticism to poetry. Edward captures the play of shadow across bare skin, the subtle tension of muscles and sinews, and the almost painterly blur at the edges that suggests movement. Historians now believe this piece was painted in 1942, during the same creative surge that produced Nighthawks. The date is staggering because it places this work at the heart of World War II, a time when Hopper's public art offered quiet consolation amidst global chaos. Yet his private canvas confronts turmoil head-on, suggesting that beneath the veneer of stoic resilience was a yearning for connection that the public could not fully grasp. In this painting, he transcends his own signature of isolation to embrace the universal need for closeness, for warmth, and for unguarded vulnerability. More than mere exhibition material, the forbidden painting represents a philosophical shift. It propels Hopper from chronicler to participant, from observer of stillness to orchestrator of emotion. Every brushstroke carries intentional weight. The way light caresses a shoulder, the tension in a stretched arch of a foot, the softness of fabric revealing curves in silhouette. Even the corners of the room betray a subtle tension, walls tilting imperceptibly as though leaning in to overhear the couple's hushed conversation. This is not voyeurism. It is a carefully constructed invitation, drawn in oil and pigment, to explore our own hidden desires and private longings. Curatorial documents reveal that in 1951, under pressure from trustees and government officials, the Whitney senior staff debated permanently removing the piece from Hopper's catalog. They feared public outcry and loss of patronage. Instead, they opted for indefinite sequestration, an archival limbo that protected corporate interests and sanitized Hopper's image as the innocent poet of American solitude. It was a decision that echoed the very themes of power and silence present in his art. In Vault's secrecy, they wielded institutional authority as if it were a brush, shaping Hopper's legacy through the strokes they chose to show and those they buried. Today, after years of scholarly persistence and legal wrangling, the veil has been lifted. The painting has been authenticated, restored to its original dimensions. The effect is electric. Audiences gasp as they step into the hush of the gallery, only to find themselves awash in a glow of feeling. Critics marvel at its technical mastery, noting how the transition from muted to vibrant hues feels both seamless and revolutionary. The forbidden painting stands as Hopper's most daring move, a testament to his willingness to break his own rules and reveal the depths of human vulnerability. In confronting this painting, we confront our own assumptions. We realize that silence in art can mask more than mystery. It can be a choice that limits expression. Hopper's journey from silent chronicler to bold confessor reminds us that every artist wrestles with self-censorship. The institutional response underscores how power curates history, deciding which stories endure and which remain in shadow. And finally, this revelation invites us to reconsider the light in all of Hopper's paintings, not as a mere aesthetic device, but as a moral spotlight revealing what we choose to illuminate and what we force into darkness. As you stand before this once-hidden masterpiece, let its hush speak to you. Let it remind you that every canvas holds choices, and every brushstroke carries intention. Hopper's forbidden painting is not just a work of art. It is a manifesto of revelation. It teaches us that true creativity demands the courage to break silence, to step beyond the frame of expectation, and to expose the heart of human experience in all its complexity. That is the legacy he ultimately left us, a whisper turned truth.